History is full of epic battles and grand wars that have shaped nations and defined eras. We think of clashes between empires, struggles for independence, and conflicts that span the globe. But what if I told you about a war that wasn't fought against another nation, but against birds? Yes, you heard that right. In 1932, the Australian military declared war on a flock of giant, flightless birds. This is the utterly bizarre, completely true story of the Great Emu War, one of the strangest and most humiliating conflicts in military history. Our story takes us to the vast, sun-scorched landscapes of Western Australia in the early 1930s. The world was in the grips of the Great Depression, and times were tough for everyone. After World War I, many Australian veterans were given plots of land to cultivate, a reward for their service. They were promised a new life as wheat farmers, a chance to build a future from the soil. But as they toiled under the harsh Australian sun, they soon discovered they weren't just fighting against economic hardship and difficult weather. They were facing a new, feathered, and surprisingly formidable enemy. Every year, as part of their natural migration cycle, massive flocks of emus would move inland from the coastal regions in search of food and water. And in 1932, an estimated 20,000 of them descended upon the farmlands of the Campion and Walgoolan districts. For these giant birds, the farmers' fields were an all-you-can-eat buffet. Acres of ripe wheat, painstakingly grown, were being trampled and devoured overnight. Emus, if you're not familiar, are not your average bird. They can stand up to 6 feet tall, weigh over 100 pounds, and run at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. They're built like feathered tanks, and they were tearing through the farmers' livelihoods. The farmers tried everything they could think of. They built fences, but the emus were strong enough to just knock them down. They tried to scare them away, but the birds were relentless. In desperation, a delegation of these ex-soldiers, who were now farmers, traveled to Perth to appeal to the government for help. They had faced enemies on the battlefields of Europe, and now they were being defeated by birds. They made a strange but compelling request. They wanted the military to intervene. Specifically, they asked for the deployment of machine guns. Sir George Pearce, the Minister for Defense, listened to their plea. It might have sounded absurd, but the situation was serious. The farmers were on the brink of ruin, and the government needed to show support. Plus, the military saw a potential opportunity for some live-fire target practice. So the decision was made. The Royal Australian Artillery would be sent to war against the emus. The operation was approved, and Major G.P.W. Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery was put in charge. He was given 2 soldiers, 2 powerful Lewis machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The media caught wind of this and dubbed it the Great Emu War. The stage was set for a showdown between man and bird. In early November 1932, Major Meredith and his men arrived in the district, ready for battle. They expected a quick and decisive victory. After all, what chance did a bunch of birds have against modern military firepower? Their first engagement took place on November 2nd. The soldiers spotted a flock of about 50 emus. They set up their machine guns, took aim, and waited for the perfect moment to open fire. But as soon as the guns started rattling, the emus did something unexpected. Instead of panicking in a single direction, they scattered into small groups and ran off in every direction, making them incredibly difficult targets. After firing hundreds of rounds, the soldiers had managed to kill only a handful of birds. It was a frustrating and embarrassing start. A few days later, they tried a new tactic. The soldiers spotted a much larger flock, perhaps 1,000 strong. This time they planned an ambush near a local dam. They set up their machine guns and waited patiently for the emus to come within close range. But just as they were about to fire, one of the Lewis guns jammed. The birds, alerted by the noise, scattered once again before any real damage could be done. Major Meredith was beginning to realize that these were no ordinary opponents. He later commented that if his men had been facing an enemy division with the same resilience as these emus, they would have stood no chance. The emus, he observed, seemed to have leaders who would keep watch while the others ate, warning the flock of any danger. They were organized. They were tactical. The military's most humiliating attempt came when they tried to mount one of the machine guns on the back of a truck. The idea was to chase the emus down and fire on the move. But the outback terrain was so rough and bumpy that the gunner couldn't get a steady aim. Meanwhile, the emus, with their long legs and incredible speed, easily outran the truck. It was a comical sight, a military vehicle bouncing wildly across a field, trying and failing to shoot a group of fleeing birds. The whole operation was turning into a farce. After nearly a week of failed attempts, the war was a complete disaster. Official reports were bleak. One account claimed that in a major engagement, the soldiers had fired 2,500 rounds of ammunition to kill, at most, a dozen emus. The press had a field day, with one politician in the Australian Parliament joking that medals should be awarded to the emus for their bravery in the face of machine guns. The public outcry and ridicule grew louder, and on November 8th, the Minister for Defense ordered a withdrawal. The Great Emu War was over. The emus had won. Of course, the problem didn't go away. The birds continued to destroy crops, and the farmers were still desperate. A few weeks later, Major Meredith was sent back for a second attempt. This time, they had slightly more success, managing to kill several hundred emus over the course of a month. But with thousands of birds still roaming the area, it was a drop in the ocean. By mid-December, the military operation was permanently called off. The government finally admitted defeat. Instead of military intervention, they opted for a more practical solution. They established a bounty system, encouraging farmers and hunters to deal with the problem themselves. Over the next few years, this proved far more effective than machine guns ever had. So what can we learn from this bizarre chapter of history? The Great Emu War is often remembered as a humorous footnote, a story of human arrogance meeting the surprising resilience of nature. It's a perfect example of how brute force and technology are not always the answer, especially when dealing with the natural world. It also serves as a poignant reminder of the conflicts that arise when human expansion pushes into wildlife. Habitat's a theme that is more relevant today than ever before. And while it's easy to laugh at the image of soldiers being outsmarted by birds, the story also highlights the real struggles of the people at the time. These were desperate farmers trying to survive during one of the worst economic crises in history. Their plea for help, as strange as it was, came from a place of real hardship. So the next time you're having a tough day, or you feel like you're fighting a losing battle, just remember the soldiers of the Royal Australian Artillery in 1932.